Welcome to the Big Life Podcast. I'm Neal Oates Jr. here with Mr. Robin Lewis. How are you doing today?
Hello, Neil. I'm doing great, man. I say it all the time, sir, but it's the truth. I look forward to getting together with you like this and with our family, with our listener family.
Well, I'm glad because here's what we're doing. Today's conversation is practical, personal, and honestly, it is needed. And so we're talking about the art of being hard to offend. And when we say hard to offend, that's not numb, that's not passive, that's not letting people walk over you. Hard to offend means you have enough emotional maturity and internal stability that every comment, every tone, every sideways look does not get to control you. And Robin, this is one of those topics that if we actually take it seriously, it can change someone's relationships and their peace almost immediately.
Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined, they're built brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
I agree with you 100%. And welcome to our listeners. I love getting on here with Neil and adding value to you. And I feel like today's episode is going to do just that. This episode is about strength. It's about real strength, the kind that doesn't have to announce itself, the kind that stays composed, the kind that does not live at the mercy of other people's moods. You know what I mean? And so being hard to offend is not about pretending that things don't hurt. Being hard to offend is about choosing what deserves access to your inner world. So easier said than done sometimes. When Neil brought this topic to me, we both kind of acknowledged that, I need to take heed. There are times where I'm easy to offend.
Okay, so Robin, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start by looking with what is happening right now culturally, right? And just in our world as we see it. Offense has become normal, right? People are on edge. People are reactive. People interpret quickly. And here's what we do when we interpret. And I say we, because I'm talking about me, myself, and I. We assume the worst. And because so much interaction happens through text and quick messages, it is easier than ever to misunderstand tone and intent. And so here's the question. The question is, how do you live with peace when offense is always available? It's always out there. There's always something that's ready for me to be offended about. How do we live in peace when that is so readily available to us?
I like that. Offense is always available. I think that's a good way to frame it, actually, Neil. So the idea there is that you can pick it up any day, just like you would pick up a package that might be sitting outside of your front door, right? It's very easy to be offended. That's the point. But you don't have to sign for that package. You can decide that I'm not receiving that. And I believe for our listeners today, that decision, and for me, that decision is freedom.
Okay, and here's something that we might consider tough, but I would also consider it true. And that is that many people are not offended because something happened, right? They are offended because they already had something unresolved inside of them, and what happened touched that thing. Maybe it was a memory that we had. And so that means that offense is often more about internal vulnerability than being provoked by something outside or by someone outside of ourselves.
Yes, that's so true. And being easily offended is often a signal. And that signal can mean insecurity. That signal can mean fatigue. We're just tired, or mentally drained. That can signal a need for control. It can also signal a wound. Maybe we're hurt. And when someone is grounded, they can hear something imperfect and they can still stay steady. Right? When I'm grounded, I can hear something, somebody can say something to me and I don't allow it to bother me that much. But when I'm depleted, everything feels personal. So being hard to offend begins with an honest question, I believe, Neal, today, and that is, what is happening inside of me that makes me interpret this as an attack?
Okay, so I'm going to say it. That's a great starting point, right? And so I say it's a great starting point because I can only speak for me. Because one of the skills that makes someone hard to offend is the ability to separate data from drama. And hear me out on this, Robin. So, in my opinion, data is what happened, right? Just data, just information. Drama is the story that I add to it. Someone was short with you. That's the data. Someone was short with Neal. They were just direct short. The story is they don't respect Neal, right? They didn't say that. I added that drama there. And so the story is they are trying to embarrass me. The story is they always do this. But hard to offend people stay with the data longer before they accept the story. So they're going to really say, well, what's the reality? What really happened? Let me deal with the facts, the truth, before we let this creative thing called our mind get a hold of it and create a story that might not even be real.
Yeah, I've been there and I've done that, man. And it's really amazing the stories that we can tell ourselves. We can convince ourselves to be true. And then we do act accordingly. That's the reality, you know? But, as we consider, I like that idea of data and taking the time to recognize it as such, so we're not jumping to conclusions here. And that's not denial, right? That's discernment, is what I hear you saying. That's maturity. That's slowing down the emotional reaction long enough to ask, what else could be true here? And as I'm saying it to you, man, I'm thinking about a interaction that I had with my wife. And I didn't slow down enough, Neal, if I can be honest with you. If I had slowed down enough, I wouldn't have quickly reacted the way that I did. And sometimes things are like that, you know? But if we slow down enough and consider what might be true, we might realize where the person is coming from. That person might be just stressed right now. Or maybe they misunderstood. Maybe we misunderstood each other, which I think was the case, what I'm referring to. But maybe they're not that skilled when it comes to communication. That's another thing that we have to be mindful of. And maybe this has nothing to do with me. Right? When you allow multiple explanations, then you reduce the potential for offense.
So, Robin, something that you just said that struck me, the idea that this could have nothing to do with me, like, is a shot at my ego. I'm like, how could this not have to do with me? I'm the most important person in my world, right? But oftentimes, as you just mentioned, it will allow us to reduce the offenses that we see. And so, another practice is learning to interpret people through patterns, not moments. And so, this is the one that has helped me and my marriage more than anything else. But because a moment is when someone speaks sharply, right? That moment, maybe they were stressed, maybe they were overwhelmed and they spoke sharply. A pattern is who they are consistently. If someone has a long pattern of respect and care, we don't let one off moment define the relationship,
That's so
right?
true.
If someone has a long pattern of disrespect, you do not keep acting surprised when they do something disrespectful. So here's what hard to defend or hard to offend is. It doesn't mean that we're naive, right? It means clear, right? So when we are hard to offend, we are clear. I understand you've been a respectful person. You've been a loving, caring. You've been sensitive to me and you lash out one time. That's not who you are. That was just a moment. And then on the other side, we can't be surprised when we see a pattern, Robin, and then we say, I didn't expect that. That means that we were unclear of who we were dealing with.
I think that's so important, Neal. Some people think that being hard to offend means that you tolerate anything. And that is not what we're saying today, folks. That's not what we're saying. Hard to offend means that you stay calm, right? Hard to offend means that you stay clear. That's what we are saying. Hard to offend means that you're not going to hand over emotional control to somebody else. I still have the choice over how I respond. And then you decide what boundaries are needed. So if there are boundaries that are needed, and oftentimes they are, you get to choose that, right? But a boundary is not an emotional outburst. It's a calm decision. And that's what we're suggesting.
Robin, I'm going to go ahead and say what people are thinking. They think that Neil and Robin have always had this, and they're like, man, do you hear the tone in which they speak? I don't know if we take them serious or not. You are talking to and listening to two men who have been on both sides of this, and that's why we're bringing this to you, because we're still working on this as we go through each day. And so now I want to pivot just a little bit and talk about why being offended feels powerful, right? Because for the moment, it does. It feels powerful. Offense gives people a sense of righteousness, right? It gives a sense of moral high ground. Like I can say, oh, how dare they? It gives permission to withdraw, punish, or to react. And so, like all of those things, like I like the feeling of every one of those. But here's what I have to understand, that offense comes at a cost. Offense is going to steal peace. It damages those relationships that we value. It keeps you emotionally tied to people you claim you do not care about. And if we aren't careful in today's day and age, we can be offended by something that someone we did not know did, someone who does not care about us, and we will carry them around all day because they're in our social media feeds and they don't even know we exist, Robert.
Wow, that's so true. That's something to think about. I think right there, our listeners can pause and go back and listen to what you just said. I think it also narrows your life, listeners. When someone is easily offended, they become easy to control. And that means that anyone can then shift their mood with a comment. Anyone can derail their day with a tone, a reaction of some sort, disrespect. And being hard to offend is actually about, being sovereign here. You decide who has access to your joy. You decide who has access to your steadiness. I have been there, Neal, where I stopped and I realized after I had responded, reacted is a better word, that I just realized that I gave somebody else the ability to actually, cause Robin to change, to do something that he didn't want to do and that he shouldn't do, and it doesn't line up with who I am. And that's a reality that we have to consider. And that's what we're doing when we give that over to somebody else. We're allowing them to shift our mood and to control how we respond.
All right. So now, as we often do, as we try to do, we never want to leave people where we were or where we are right now. We want to take them. So we're going to look at see how we can build on what we've been talking about. So we're going to give some real frameworks that people can remember. And here's going to be the first one: assume less. Just make fewer assumptions. Most offense comes from assumptions. Assumptions about the intent that someone had, assumption about the motives that they might have, assumptions about respect or disrespect. And so here's what we know: the more assumptions you make, the more offended you will be. And so, hard to offend people ask questions internally before they react externally. So those assumptions, they put those to the side, and then they're going to come in and they're going to ask questions before they react externally.
That's very good stuff. Good practical stuff. I already shared a situation that I had with my wife. So here's another one as I say that. Slow down your response. You don't have to respond immediately. right? Many situations resolve themselves if you don't rush to react. I really have to hear that one, because I have not done it just once or twice, right? I've rushed to respond. Emotional maturity is often just the ability to pause. Pause, Robin. I'm speaking to myself, folks, as I say this. Pause, and it doesn't mean that you ignore something. Pause means that you choose timing, you choose tone, and you choose clarity. That's what pause means. So just kind of pause. Pause the timing, pause your tone, and pause for clarity.
The next one that I want to share, Robin, is one that you talk about pause and slowing down, don't rush to respond. For me, it's don't argue with interpretations. And right, so here's what I mean by that. If someone says something that could be taken multiple ways, do not build a case in your head for the worst interpretation. Right. So so that's why my creativity will go to, well, this is the one they meant. Well, of the 7 options, why did you choose the absolute worst one? So I instead am going to encourage you to do what I am learning to do, and that's choose curiosity. Right. You can say, help me understand what you meant by that. Help me understand what you meant by that. That single phrase has saved more relationships than any clever or witty comeback ever has or will.
I like that. Help me to understand what you meant by that. That's good stuff. And I think this leads to a key skill here that we're identifying today, and that is to clarify before you conclude. Clarify before you conclude. People conclude quickly. I can conclude quickly, as I shared with you earlier. But that, when I do that, I decide what it meant, right? I decide what the other person intended, and I decide what it says about them. And I can't tell you how many times I've done that and I've been wrong. And so, hard to offend people actually take the time to clarify. They ask, they listen, and they verify.
You just modeled out the next one that I wanted to add here. That an important piece of being hard to offend is knowing yourself, right? If you know your values, if you know your identity, if you know what you stand for, you become less dependent on external validation. Right. So when Neal is secure, I don't need everyone to approve of me. When Neal is secure, criticism does not collapse who I am. So when Neal is secure, misunderstanding does not define me. And so I just need you to replace my name with yours and speak those things over your life.
Yeah, it is so true, man. And I think that is a part of maturity. That is a part of remembering who you are. That's a part of, how you're identifying yourself. Security, I think when you have that security, it changes everything. When someone is grounded in who they are, they can hear feedback without falling apart, right? They can hear disagreement without feeling threatened. And a good trigger is if you're like I've been open and I've shared with Neal and I've shared actually on this podcast where sometimes I realize on the pickleball court, Neal, right? I know you're going to smile about that, but I realized there was a trigger there that when I was challenged like that, it caused something in me. And I had to really stop and take a look at that. Where was that coming from? And they can say that that's your opinion and I can stay calm, right? That's that, are you sure? Are you sure? Like on the pickleball court. And if they say yes, then okay, and leave it at that, that's it. And there's a freedom about that. There's a freedom about being able to do that.
All right, Robin, we're going to jump to this word called boundaries, and we might think of it as a bad thing, but we do want to talk about boundaries again because people will ask, what if someone is actually disrespectful? Right? And here's what I say. If someone is disrespectful, you can still be hard to offend. You do not have to internalize their behavior. You don't have to carry it as a wound. So you can respond with calm clarity. You can say, I want to keep this conversation respectful. If that can't happen, we can either pause and revisit later, or we just don't revisit it later. But there's no drama. Here's the key to being hard to offend: no drama, no explosion, just leadership. And the leadership we're talking about right here is that self leadership.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so true, man. I've been there. This is one definitely for me, without a doubt. But I like that idea that you just shared that we can say, listen, if we can't be respectful here, let's come back later. Where I have gone is I've matched them, Neil. And, sometimes I can think of a family member, for example, that over years, it took me years before I finally realized, Robin, don't go there. But what I would do is I would match them and I would then say things that are disrespectful. Just being transparent here. Carrying on with the idea here, sometimes the most powerful boundary is not a speech. Maybe it can be distancing yourself. Maybe it can be just choosing to not engage. Sometimes that's the answer. Just don't engage at all. Some people use offense as a hook, right? They want a reaction. Do you know people like that, Neil? You
Of
have people
course,
like
I
that in your
do.
life? I do too. They want you pulled into their chaos. And I have to be careful to just not even engage. Edna has told me a few times, Rob, just don't engage, literally, because it always ends up in this place when you do. And so I finally realized in this particular case that I'm talking about that it was best for me to not even engage when it started going somewhere. So being hard to offend means that you do not bite. You can love people and still refuse their chaos. And so what I mean is you don't bite the bait. You don't fall for what they're doing, what they're pulling you into. And you can still love people, but you don't have to be a part of their chaos.
Absolutely. And so as we continue, we're going to go ahead and make this practical for what we call everyday life because most offense happens in small places. And this is where we're talking about like text messages or tone or short responses. Someone not responding fast enough, the way they look at us, a comment in a meeting, a family gathering, a social media post. If you are offended often, your life will feel like a series of emotional storms, just one after another. So I'm going to encourage you to pick a principle. Most things are not worth a storm. Most things that we go through on a daily basis are not worth the storm that if we respond, if we allow it to take us there. So ask yourself, will this matter in 2 days? Will this matter in 2 weeks? Will it matter in 2 months? If not, just let it go. Easier said than done. But if it's not going to matter 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, just let it go.
I did that the other day and I was so proud of myself. I was so proud of myself. That's wisdom. I wish I could do it all the time, but there was a specific time where I'm thinking about right now where I did just that. I realized that come on, it's just not worth it. And this is not going to go anywhere. And that's wisdom, man. And I felt good. I felt good on the inside. A lot of people are spending emotional energy on things that will not even matter by the weekend. I've been there. Being hard to offend means that you have standards for what earns your emotional attention. I said it for me earlier, Neil, that this is for me. It's so good to actually speak this out because it's a reminder that I have the control over that. I choose what earns my emotional attention. And here's the truth. Not everything qualifies.
And so for me, Robin, here's a statement that helps me in my daily journal, in my daily journey, in my daily battle against being offended. And that's that offense is optional, but wisdom is intentional. So you mentioned that package outside of the porch. So it's up to me to sign it or not. I do not have to take delivery, but wisdom is intentional. And here's what I mean is that wisdom takes effort. It takes humility. It takes restraint, but at the end of that intentionality, there is a reward that we call peace. And peace is the desired outcome.
Yeah, peace is powerful, man, right? Peace is a sign that you're not controlled by circumstances, as we talked about earlier, where we allow people and situations to take that peace away from us. And peace is not passive. As you said, you have to be intentional about it. And being hard to offend does not mean that you do not feel, right? It means that you don't let your feelings drive you. That's what we're saying today, folks. That's what Robin is being reminded of.
So we're going to ask this week that when you feel offense rising or bubbling up, do three things. First, pause. Then I'm going to encourage you to separate the data from the story that this thing right here is telling you from your mind, and then choose curiosity or silence before you choose reaction. So you're going to choose curiosity or silence before you choose to react. And then we see what happens.
Yeah, that's so good. And more than likely, you're going to notice something. You're going to notice that your life becomes quieter, your relationships are safer, right? And your mind becomes clearer because you're no longer handing your peace to somebody else. You're keeping your peace within.
So hopefully we hope that our goal has been accomplished here, and that is to help you become hard to offend, or at least leading you down that path a little further than you were. Like, subscribe, share, comment, go to the show notes or the description. You'll see some contact info there. And we just want to tell you thank you for being here. Don't be hard to offend. I'm sorry, be hard to offend in every walk of life today.
Yeah, right on. Thanks for being here with us again today. And remember, we love you. God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time we see you or you see us, remember, we're right there with you. Peace.
Peace.